Welcome back. In celebration of the city's centennial, we're getting a first-hand account from lifelong Torrance resident and former Mayor Ken Miller on some of the events that have shaped Torrance history. Torrance had a pretty diverse farming community, ranged from pig farming to strawberries to dairy farms. Did it really seem like growing up in the country back then?
Yeah, I suppose it did. You got to remember, at those times, Torrance was a city of 7 square miles. So areas beyond, say, Hawthorne Boulevard going west, that was all farmland. And Japanese people would farm that, mostly Japanese. A few people like Bill Mertz, who made his living off that, was one of the few Caucasians that actually farmed that land. And the Japanese did a wonderful job in farming it. The ironic part of that is what is now well known as Walteria. From Walteria to Sepulveda, coming north, west of Hawthorne, in deep winters when the rain really flowed, that was completely flooded over. You used to row boats in that area, that whole area, which is now part of the city of Torrance, because at that time the 7 square miles was represented on the west side by Madrona and Sepulveda on the south side. So, and the area south of Sepulveda was the area that was really flooded. It seemed like every winter we had that going on. But the Japanese did a tremendous job in farming that land prior to World War II, of course. And not many, after many of them went to the camps, so to speak, and very few came back after World War II. We still have a couple citizens from that era of time still in Torrance. So it was a big, then Torrance decided to annex. And they annexed from 7 square miles to 21 square miles, give or take. And that included the annexation from south of Sepulveda and from Madrona west to Hawthorne Boulevard, some in North Torrance and some in the Riviera, and we become roughly a 21 square mile city. And that was all vacant land now because there was no more farming going on. And that's when the developers came in, Ray Watt, Don Wilson, after World War II, and built so many of those tract homes that are there now, Southwood, for one. And that population just boomed then. And that was in the 50s and in the 60s. And as the population, as they built houses, the population kept increasing. So by, I would say, approximately mid-1960, the population was probably close to 50,000, just like that. We were the all-American city at one time. We were chosen as an all-American city. And the growth was just so overwhelming. And I think the people, the city did a great job in laying out the developed areas that were developed eventually on that. So once we got into the 21 square miles, it just changed everything.
Now, you mentioned earlier your relationship with Louie Zamperini, and I heard a story that he actually changed your diapers.
No, I'll tell you the story. Not quite Louie, but his mother did.
Okay.
I lived next door maybe from the ages, maybe age 7 to age 14. So I was the class of 41 at Torrance High. Louie was the class of, I think, 35. So he was 5 or 6 years. And in those days, the elementary school was separate from the high school, but they had no middle school. So you went to the elementary school up to the 9th grade, then you moved on to the high school, which is you're really way down on the ladder in 9th grade and in a senior high school. But what happened with when I was mayor at one time, and I knew the Zamperinis really well. I was in and out of their house. They had Louie had a sister named Virginia who was my age level, and we used to walk to elementary school together back and forth, and I in and out of their house. I eat spaghetti in and out of their house. And what happened was that I was at a mayor of the city, and there was a problem in her neighborhood, which is just off the corner of Crenshaw and Sonoma, where she lived. And she was a wonderful lady. But I said something that she didn't like. And she got the microphone, and she said, "Now let me tell you something. I changed your diapers when you were 2 years old, so don't tell me what to do."
Don't get too big for your britches.
I shut up.
Yeah. And just so for those of you who, I assume that everyone knows who Louie Zamperini is, but he is our local Olympic hero and World War II hero as well.
I was fortunate enough, my daughter had always, who lives in Santa Rosa, had always wanted to meet him because she heard these stories from me. So one day I called Louie, and we went up to his home in Hollywood Hills, and we spent about 4 hours just chatting about Torrance as it was, you know, and she got a real earful.
And another influential family is the Post family.
Yes.
And you were also close with them. Tell us about your relationship and the influence they played here in Torrance.
We grew up, George was about a year behind me in school, and we buddied around, and we loved the beach, playing volleyball.
First of all, who was George?
Oh, George Post's grandfather started the first bank in Torrance, Torrance National Bank on the corner of Satori and Marcelina. The grandfather started that bank, and there was only Bank of Italy was across the street, which has become the Bank of America. There were the two banks in town. The grandfather passed away, and George's father took the bank over as president and held the bank for many years. And subsequently, George was being tutored to really take the bank over, and when the directors decided to sell out the First California Bank, I believe it was, United California Bank, George went along as a manager in that branch for many years, and then resigned and started his own bank, which is Torrance National Bank on Sepulveda, which is now, and they, about 7 years ago, they sold his interest, and George retired. Well, so happens he and I buddied around all those years, and his mother owned some lots out in South Torrance, and George built a house on it, and I bought the lot next door. So for 46 years, we were neighbors, and I loved what he said to me when they dedicated the Ken Miller Recreation Center to the, they had a group of a couple hundred people there, and everybody gets up and says the nice things about you and all that. George got up and he said, you know, the only reason they're named this after Miller was they're going to tear it down next year anyway. And he sat down, he never said anything else. That was George, you know. And, but we were probably as close as anybody could be for all those years. And of course our wives got to be very, literally like sisters today, and we're still living next door to Phyllis. George passed away approximately 6 or 7 years ago. You have to know George to appreciate. I did his eulogy, and I said, one of the cute stories is his bank was just located across from the Madonna Marsh. So he decided that Torrance never had a ocean front, and you know it rains and the Madonna Marsh fills up. So he declared a new commission in Torrance called the Harbor Commission, and he became president. He had a badge running around town as president of the Harbor Commission. He would do things like that, you know.
Yeah.
But he just had a personality. If he said something nice about you, you probably wasn't his friend. He'd have to be saying something.
Look out.
With a twinkle in his eye.
Okay. I want to talk about the Depression and World War II and how that sort of impacted your family and also life here in Torrance.
Well, like many families in Torrance, virtually all of them, going through the Depression, that they were laid off work. And I remember they had a welfare program in Torrance where the mothers would go down to a little unit across the street from the old post office, which is now the Historical Society office building. And they would go in there and they would sew clothes up, and they would get food coupons. And then they would go, there was 3 stores in Torrance then, Piggly Wiggly, and a local one, and I can't remember the other one. And they would take the coupons and trade them in for food. And that's how one of the ways you ate. And handing clothes down to each other was just automatic. You know, from one neighbor, they outgrew them to make sure somebody younger would get those. So there was a complete organization. There was a wealthy side to Torrance in those days. I mean, people that weren't wealthy necessarily, but well off, that, you know, grew out of Post Avenue and all those nice homes and everything. The Post home was one of those that Mr. Post had built, obviously still there. And then they were well off enough that they would share with people of lesser means on it. So that was really nice. I didn't think much about it at the time. I was a little too young. I was like 9 years old on it, and we accepted it as a way of life.
Right, right. Now you graduated from Torrance High School. What sort of path did you take after you graduated?
What was that?
What was your path after graduating from Torrance High School?
Well, I went to Compton Junior College. I worked 1 year after getting out of the service. I was in the service about 3 years. And I went to work at Union Oil for 1 year, and I realized I was literally getting nowhere. And so I went back to school. I had the GI Bill, of course. That was one reason I went back. And I attended Compton JC for 2 years, and then moved on to Occidental College, which is a highly accredited school, believe me, and a nice, beautiful school. And I graduated with a BA from them. And I have a teaching. I went to SC for a year to get my so-called secondary to be able to teach on a high school level. Finished that, and I knew I wasn't going to make much money doing that. Meantime, I got married about that time, and it brings back the Post family. I got married, Judy, that was 57 years ago, and we really didn't have any money, period. So I went into Torrance National Bank, where Wallace Post, George's father, was situated. And they didn't situate in offices. They were on the open floor. And he said, well, and you always treated me like George treated me, you know. Well, what do you want? I said, I want to borrow $300. Well, what do you want $300 for? And I said, I can get a used stove and a refrigerator because I just got married. And he said, you what? You can't even afford yourself. Anyway, I got the devil from him for a good 30 minutes. You're doing the dumb thing. Remember, I used to go up there and play in the house with George, and so he knew me very well. And finally, after about 30 minutes, I reckoned I wasn't going to get any money. So I got up to go out the door. He said, where are you?